Hey everybody, this is Beast. Welcome back to my channel. My name is Scottyallenday. Well, today is going to be part 2 of my roadie series. I don't know how many parts there's going to be to it. The more that I start thinking about what I want to be able to put up here for the roadie life, and like I said, I was talking to a friend of mine the other day, trying to keep up, and I ended up with a little bit of a tour at the Backstage. They would not let me film back there. I don't understand why, but so just trying to compare what the 70s, 80s, and 90s, which was the pioneer time of being a roadie, to today is quite different. So join me with part 2, and I will explain as much as I can. For the time being, I'm still gathering more information. And this is just basically a small documentation, so later on when I redo this video, I could put together a much better, much stronger series. So, back in the 70s and the 80s, most of the roadies would either sleep in the trailer, they would sleep in the trucks, or they would probably set themselves a little spot down underneath the stage to sleep. That was pretty much it. I mean, the arenas would allow us to sleep under the stage. We'd sleep in the trucks, or we'd sleep inside of the trailers. Now, today's roadies, depending on what section you are, if you're concessions, more than likely you're going to sleep in the hotel. If you're a roadie, they have a truck now that's set up with individual rooms. These rooms are about 6 feet wide all the way across, so they're about 6 by 8. So you have a 6 by 8 windowless closet that you sleep and you keep your gear in. Now, that's really not that bad. I mean, I've got to experience that when I was working for the circus, but only we had a bunk with a curtain. That was our sleeping quarters. That was horrible. You had a tiny little locker, you had 2 drawers underneath, and you had a shelf, and people constantly stole from you. That was when I was working for the circus. It was terrible. It was absolutely terrible. You really had no place where you could be able to set up a crock pot, no place where you could be able to set up something to cook, and it kind of made you reliant on the dining cars. So that's probably an upgrade from yesteryear till now, but I understand today because of the fact that being a roadie, you're basically a pioneer between the 70s and the 90s compared all the way up to the super shows that they have today. So, I mean, basically when you were a roadie, you really didn't have any place to lay your bag. When I traveled from show to show, I had a backpack. When I got to the show, I kept my backpack basically in a locked trunk at the show. That's all I asked for, was a trunk that I could lock, that I could put my gear in so nobody could be able to steal it because I have my tools. And a lot of roadies that have tools pretty much had the priority of any place that they could be able to lock stuff up. Speaking of tools, and most of that got started in the early 80s, which I wasn't part of the early 80s. I was more in the later 80s when I started touring, that people stole tools all the time. And the people that knew what they were doing and needed certain tools to be able to perform their most needed functions would get them stolen, and people would run off with it. There wasn't really a whole lot of security back in that time for people. People could act, just a normal, everyday person could actually just walk backstage and not even be questioned. They didn't. I mean, that was the easiest way to sneak into a concert back then. You just go and you grab something, and then you just walk right in. You could have a duffel bag full of dog waste and walk right in, and they'll just think that you're delivering something. Trust me, we've seen that several times. So that was pretty much the sleeping quarters and trying to make sure that you had that you secured the items. And then now, the pay right now is much different. It used to be $20 to $30 a day under the table between the 70s and the 80s. The 90s, you more than likely had to have your photo ID and fill out your documents for taxes, and that's actually when people started getting paychecks. It was about the mid-90s. Dailies, the stage boss would come up and he was your paymaster. You'd get your cash and you'd go. I got most of my shows paid under the table. Once when we went overseas, it was pretty much the same thing. We just constantly receive just cash, and that's it. Our food, depending on who you toured with, there would be bands that would buy food for the entire crew. But when you're on the road, you're on your own. Even today, they do the same thing. Depending on who you're touring with, they'll cater the whole food. Some people just hire a trailer, buy a trailer and hire a cook, and the cook will cook you whatever you want on the menu. You have one meal a day. You pick what you want on your menu, and you eat. So today's is much more generous than it was back then. And I wouldn't mind to go back and experience the life of the roadie today, but the thing is I'm so out of practice. I've got a lot of work to do to be able to get my upper body strength back to where I can be able to climb the ropes to get back into the rafters. There's a lot of people that are using lifts, scissor lifts. A lot of people are using mechanical hoists. So a lot of the muscle work that we had back in the 80s has been replaced by machinery. So it makes the job a little bit easier, but we are dealing with a lot more computerized components. We're dealing with software. We're dealing with, you really have to have a background in order to be able to work the shows today. You have to specialize in something if you want to get paid more. Back in the 80s, you really didn't have to pay it. You really didn't have to specialize. If you were a jack of all trades, master of none, you were on good terms with the band. Because all it would take was one guy to come out and say, "Hey, I need this done. We need to move the drums over about another 8 feet, and we need Tommy Lee's drums to light up because we're dropping glitter on his drums for a prank tonight." We have to do it. If Nikki Sixx says we're going to play a prank on Tommy Lee by dropping glitter on him, and we want his drums lit up so we can be able to watch the effect, we have to do it. No matter how much it ticks them off. And believe it or not, a lot of people had pranks played on them. They had us string up a lead guitarist's guitar with fishing line. And he went to go and pick it up, and he got ready to go and play it. And he looks at the band, and he looks back at whoever's handling the guitars and pointing at it, and then the band reveals the prank. Because technically, nobody's supposed to be touching anybody's guitars. The guitarist normally takes care of it, or they have their right-hand man or their roadie that they trust the most to be able to take care of their equipment. Back in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, when we were done, you had a certain amount of people that wore the black suits. The other people were all security. Their most trusted people were security for Backstage and for the back after party. Today, they have different jobs for different people, but they still do the similar thing. If you're security, you still help with the teardown. If you're concessions, you tear down your concession, you can make extra money helping with the tear down. So that's pretty much the comparisons right now between the 80s and today with setting up and tearing down stages. Of course, Jim Straight's train is in much better shape. His train back in the 80s and 90s, transporting his Carnival on rails, used to be the worst thing in the world. I mean, they were basically condemned train cars. And the circus was that way for a while until Union Pacific said, hey, we're not going to pull your trains unless you fix them. They fixed them and they got them pulled. So there's pretty much the roadie life. I think that probably concludes this series for now. I'll probably do another one later on about interactions with the band, interactions with the fans, and how roadies dealt with all that. This is just a nice little start to doing two-part series, especially with the craziness that was in my life. And, well, until next time, I'll do that. If you have any questions, please drop a comment in the comment section. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button or hit that notification bell so you don't miss another video. And until next time, keep on rocking.